Hey everybody. This week I want to talk about something that I didn't really understand for a long time, and that is obedience. And there was somebody I knew who was a really big Keith Green fan. And if you've never heard of Keith Green, he was a Christian singer back in the 1970s, and he actually died in a plane crash. And as I listened to the songs, he had a song on there that talks about to obey is better than sacrifice. And I had never heard that before, and I didn't know where it came from in the Bible. So I wanted to share with you that actually came from the Old Testament. It's from 1 Samuel 15:22. And he's comparing people who would give burnt sacrifices to God, but then they didn't really obey Him. And when I listened to that song, it helped me to kind of understand that what God really wants is for me to obey Him and do what He's asked me to do instead of keeping myself busy doing other things. Now, if you know the story in the New Testament about Mary and Martha when Jesus is at their house, I tend to be more of a Martha because I like to stay busy and I might be doing things that God didn't necessarily ask me to do. And that's not really the way it should be, right? It's like I might be doing sacrifices. I might be about some things that are maybe helping other people. Maybe I'm giving my time to do this. Maybe I'm, helping with something else. But if He didn't call me to do those things, then it's akin to the burnt sacrifices that the people in the Old Testament were doing, the Jewish people. They would give these burnt sacrifices and then they would just go off and kind of forget about God. So I have, in the last few years, started trying to really make sure that I'm not doing things that are just kind of busy, Christian busy work. That's what I call them, Christian busy work. It's easy to get caught up in that, like, to sign up for something at your church and then to sign up for something else and something else. And then, before you know it, you don't have any spare time. And instead of really listening to see what God wants you to be doing, you're just busy. You're a Martha. And I have a tendency to do that. So this is something where I have to remind myself on a regular basis, don't be a Martha. Don't just be busy. And when it comes to obedience, I think some people kind of chafe at that term, but I did want to share a reference with you, and that is that we have a dog. And this is the second Australian cattle dog that we've had. And if you know anything about these dogs or healers, most people think of Bluey now from the TV show. The thing about cattle dogs is they're independent, they are really intelligent, they think they know everything because they're really smart, but they also have a very high energy level. And it is important if you have one to make sure that they're obedience trained. And so I have trained this dog just like I trained the first one that we had. And it's not so that he will just do my will. I I have obedience training with him to increase his vocabulary so he will know what I'm saying. And so that if something happens, he will listen to my voice instead of the thing that's going on around us. And so it was about a year ago, I had him out and we were hiking in a state park that's not far from us. And he doesn't like other dogs very much. Don't know why. He came from the shelter. He had a rough puppyhood. So I was walking him, and I like going off on trails like that instead of going to things like dog parks because he doesn't do well there. So he loves hiking, so we're out in the middle of the woods, and all of a sudden I hear dogs coming. And there was a deer that ran by. And so there were these hunting dogs that were just out and about, and they were running this deer. And I thought, okay, maybe one or two, no, five dogs. And immediately I thought, our dog is just going to have to obey me. He's just going to have to listen to me. So I ordered him to sit and to stay, and I grabbed a stick. And as those dogs showed up, I told them they had to go. And I want you to know that my dog said nothing. He said nothing. And every one of those dogs left. There was one, a little beagle, who kind of hung back, and I was like, no, you got to go, buddy. And so he went and joined his friends, and they ran off chasing that poor deer. But that was only possible that my dog was good because he knew to listen to me. He understood obedience. And that's what God wants with me. It's not that He wants to order me here and there. He wants me to be able to hear His voice. That's what obedience is really about. When you hear His voice and you do the things that He asks you to, then you know more about Him. And the next time He speaks to you, you're more likely to hear His voice. That's kind of how exactly how this podcast got started, because I was praying at the end of 2023 and God said, "Are you a sayer or a doer?" And I said, "I'm a doer. I don't just say, I do." And He said, "Okay, well then I want you to start a podcast where you basically encourage people and talk about these things." And I said, "Oh, okay, I can do that." And so I have done this in obedience. And because I know that if I am obedient in the things He tells me to do, He will give me more things to do. Just like in the parable with the man who was leaving and he gave talents to 3 people, and the first 2 used their talents to make more money, but the third one buried his and said, "Oh, here you go, I'll give it back to you." I don't want to be that one because he was not happy with that one. I want to be found faithful in the things that He has called me to do, so that He will then use me in bigger things, because I want to hear His voice and I want to do His will. So that's kind of the obey is better than sacrifice. Obedience is what He asks for, not for you to be busy doing kingdom work. Don't be too busy that you can't hear Him, because in order to be obedient, you need to do what it says in the Bible, but you also need to be able to hear Him. And I think that's what obedience is ultimately about, our being able to hear Him and to respond to His voice. So, I encourage you this week, don't be so busy that you don't make time to hear Him. Make sure that you're obeying Him and doing not only what we're called to do in the Bible, but you're listening to see, is there something else that He wants me to be doing now? So, be blessed.